All right, welcome back to the Knox Hollow Wood Shop from the Nemesis Gear Steampunked Out channel. And we're back up here in the wood shop today, and I'm going to do a little bit different video. We're going to cover coloring options for wood. And I know you used to see me on the lathe, and I kind of skate over some of this a little bit. And I've tried some trial and error stuff, and I thought I would share with you today some different options. So one of the things about wood, I mean, you can get these really nice woods. There's wenge or wingy. Actually, I checked on the pronunciation of this, and wenge, wingy, or wenge are all correct. So it just kind of depends, I think, on where you're from. But anyways, I still have a tendency to pronounce it wenge. You know, it's a really nice wood. It's dark, Purple Heart, beautiful wood. Padauk, you know, it's another great wood. You know, the thing is that these exotic colors usually come with exotic prices. And maybe you're not able to afford, or you don't have access to those woods in your area, and you're stuck with your more domestic woods. You know, if you're, you got something like maple or walnut, you know, that's your color range is kind of in between those colors. So, you know, your birch, your maple, your ash, then you've got your kind of lighter ones like, well, cherry can be a little bit darker, but alder, you know, and then you start moving down into, you know, your walnuts and stuff like that. Those are all usually fairly available. A lot of times you can get those at your local hardware store, but they're not terribly exciting. Well, let's start off with options for, you know, even if you're doing some of the high-end woods, you know, whether it's your domestics or your high-end woods, sometimes when you're doing a woodworking project, and I'm speaking from as a wand maker, you want to have more than one color. So you want some contrast, something to set it off. And we'll start with the simplest way to do that, obviously, is you can burn the wood. On the lathe, you can do a friction burn. I do that with just the wire. You've seen me check out some of my my lathe videos. You'll see me use the wire a lot. So that friction burning is one way. You can also friction burn by rubbing two pieces of wood together. If I'll hold a piece of walnut on the lathe spinning, and it basically burns the wood. The downside of that is it's going across the grain, and that can kind of tear up the grain. And different woods will react differently to being heated or burned. Some woods work very well. I found that, unfortunately, maple doesn't like it as nicely. It doesn't give a good even color. Some woods work really well with the burning, and that's just something you're gonna have to experiment with. There are some woods that work pretty good with burning, but also change color. For instance, Purple Heart is going to change with the application heat. So you can use a torch on this and get it kind of, start to char and get to near black, and then clean it off with, various methods. But you can also even use a heat gun, or if you keep the torch farther away and get it hot, you can put it in the oven, and that'll usually make it more purple or darker purple. As this ages, sometimes this can turn brown, and by heating it up in the oven or something, you can bring the purple back with heat. So heat can be your friend in the right circumstance. It can also be an enemy. One of the downsides with heat, especially using a torch, on thinner woods, like the shaft of, the blade of a wand or something, when you're getting, really pinky thin on that, the heat can distort the wood too, because as it heats, it's chemically changing the wood, and it can bend or warp or twist, and it's no longer going to be perfectly centered. Sometimes that's okay. It just depends on how much it is. But again, heat can be your friend and it can be an enemy. And sometimes it's experimentation, and sometimes you can ruin a good wand. The other option is paint, obviously. I'm not a huge fan of paint. In the right instances, it can be good. If you have a wand or something that is carved out, it's got like holes or grooves or reliefs or something, then using a paint might be a good idea, because paint itself, when I'm talking about paint, I'm talking about paints like acrylic. When you're airbrushing or spraying or brushing it on or something, that's going to leave paint on the surface of the wood, and that's going to be susceptible to rubbing or wearing. flaking off in some way. And in addition, a lot of times, especially if it's brushed on, it's a thick coat, it looks plastic and fake, and I'm a very big fan of that natural wood look. So if you do use a paint, I would suggest something like that you can put on very thin, like an airbrush paint or something. I do use, like this is a PH Doc Martens. This is very expensive. It's like $7 an ounce. But I've used this copper. I've used the gold or silver or even a paint pen to go inside grooves to mimic a metallic inlay, or gold or black or something inside of holes to give more depth or something. And that, that can work well. But again, that's going to be personal taste. I'm not a huge fan of that. Another way to darken the wood that sometimes you can get black is ebonizing fluid. And there's a couple ways. I did look up, when I looked into ebonizing, one of the ways they talked about doing it was using Speedball ink, because it's really black. I think this is made, one of the things that makes it black is they're using soot, like off of candles or oil lamps or whatever. I've found it to easily rub off. It still leaves it dark in color, but it doesn't leave an even color and stuff like that. I'm not a huge fan of the Speedball ink. If you're looking to do that, we'll get into dyes here in a minute. But ebonizing fluid is something that you can make. This is distilled vinegar, all right? Distilled white vinegar and quadruple aught steel wool. So if you go and you get steel wool at the hardware store, there's different grade ratings on how fine it is. It's the ultra fine. It'll say number 0000. So 4 zeros on that. Put that in a jar of vinegar. You let that completely dissolve. Typically takes between 2 to 7 days, depending. It's going to completely deteriorate. It's going to leave sediments in the bottom. What I did is once that was done, I filtered it off, and it'll turn into this kind of reddish orange, brownish color or whatever. And what this is iron acetate. Okay, iron acetate is going to react with tannin in the wood, and it's going to darken it. So that's it's great on some woods if it's got tannin. For instance, this walnut, when I brush this iron acetate on here, well, of course, it's going to be wet at first, so it's going to darken just from the wetness of it. Well, I'm going to let that sit for just a second. Sit right there. And let me get this out of the way. But if you end up with something like, say, maple, the downside of maple is, honestly, it really has very little reaction. Okay, and you're going to get everything in between. So with walnut, this stuff will turn almost black, depending on each piece is a little bit different. This is great. It has a lot of tannin in there to react with the iron acetate. But Purple Heart works really well with the iron acetate. Here's a scrap piece. I actually have a bunch of scrap pieces I keep handy. I just wrote right on there what kind of wood it is, and then I'll paint a little bit on the side before I take it to the wand or whatever. And I do suggest, if you're going to do tests like this, sand that surface first so you can get an idea. I found that having a good fresh sanded surface gives you a better idea of your colors. But you're going to get different colors, just depending on. Here's a piece of alder, turns a nice brown. Cedar seemed to work okay. Every piece is a little different. Cherry, I've seen it kind of turn sort of a silvery color. The other problem with using the something like this, whether it's dye, I will get into dye in a second again, but iron acetate, it wants to travel up the grain of the wood. So you can solve that by, if you're doing it on a lathe, you can friction burn with a wire. You've seen me do it in some of my other videos, and or you can use a wood burner. If you're doing it on a flat surface, you can wood burn these black lines in here. And now what that does is it severs the grains of the wood so that the iron acetate travels up the grain and stops, in those grooves. And you can see in this piece of cherry here that what I've done, just as on a test piece to see how it would look. And again, that's going to be just kind of It varies, depends on the type of wood, and not just the type of wood, but sometimes one piece of cherry will look one color and another piece of cherry will look a little bit different. So you never know exactly what you're going to get. It may be similar, but you never know. Walnut seems to be pretty darn consistent. As you can see, that got almost black. Almost every time that I do walnut, it's a very black color. If you look really, really close, you can kind of see some little brown flecks in there. And if you sand this after it dries, and you're going to want to because it does raise the grain of the wood, when you sand this a little bit, you want to be careful not to sand it too much. I suggest going to about a 180 grit before a 180 to 220 before that you put your solution on. And then after that, you can burnish it or go with lightly with a 320 to take off that raised grain. The good thing about ebonizing solution is because it reacts chemically with the wood and darkens it, the wood itself is now the color, so you don't have to worry about that rubbing off, okay? So that's ebonizing solution. Pretty innocuous, works pretty good. The other way that you can do that is dye. And when it comes to dyes, I did some research trying to find some good recommendations on dye. This is Keda, K-E-D-A, Keda dye or whatever. And it got some okay recommendations. And so I gave it a shot. I mixed it up like it said. And honestly, I had crap luck. So I still have some mixed up here. This is the Keda dye mixed the way they said. And I'm gonna try this. This is a piece of maple. And the maple is one of the more pale woods I can use. And so when I put this on here, this dye, I mean, it's okay. I mean, you can see, yeah, it's blue. It's doing a good job. You wipe it off. It's not a really even, and maybe I should play with the mix a little bit. Maybe it should be more concentrated. It just never felt like it evenly penetrated the wood, okay? Honestly though, I have found I am a leather worker. I have lots of leather dye in the shop, and Fiebing's, this is their alcohol dye, not an oil dye. I have not tried their oil dye. It might work. The alcohol dye, I cannot complain about that. There's a big difference in color there. I don't know if it's just more concentrated or it's just the formula is a little bit better. As you can see, I wipe that off pretty quickly, and it's just a superior color. It's darker. You can thin this out a little bit. If it's too dark, you can try thinning it down with some denatured alcohol or something, and that's going to help. The biggest downside that I have found with the leather dye that I don't know is true about the wood dyes that are available. I know this Keda dye is not the only brand. Maybe there's other brands that would work better, but honestly, I've had such good luck with the leather dye. I haven't tried them. The leather dye will rub off, as you can see. And this is still slightly damp, but after this completely dries, you can buff it and stuff like that, but it's still, if you're holding that in your hand, it can kind of rub off on your hand. It doesn't really hurt. It doesn't change the color of the dye. With paint, when it rubs off, it rubs the paint off. With the dye, it stays pretty penetrated, but it is going to rub off. So you want to let that completely dry and then cover that, seal that with something. I have found that I just like a nice lacquer because you can put it on in very thin coats, build up a couple of layers, and because it's not overly thick, it still has that natural wood look, and the dye leaves the wood grain intact. So because it's penetrating, it's not sitting on top, it's in the wood, not on the wood. So it's not covering the grain. And you still get that nice natural wood look. And I've even seen it when it's really, sanded and stuff, and then you put the dye on, it almost looks iridescent in there. It's really nice. But again, that's one way just to kind of play with your finishes and stuff like that. That can work for you. But yeah, anytime that I want to go with a color, they have, the leather dyes come in tons of different colors. And you can, your blues, your reds, your greens, yellows, purples, You're just gonna have to experiment. It works, the more pale your wood is, the better it seems to work. Obviously, if you're trying to put, you know, green on brown, it's not, you know, it's not gonna look good because, you know, it's not covering the wood, it's going down into the wood. So your color, it's gonna depend on the color that you start with. So, plus side, downside of using dye is the type of wood you start with matters. So if you're planning on dyeing the whole thing, I would start with as pale, close to white as you can get. As you can see, maple works really well. Probably would work pretty well on birch, stuff like that. Or aspen. I've never tried on aspen. It's a little bit soft, but anyways. So those are some options when it comes to dye. So I think that covers most of the coloring options that I have done. There's dye and black. Leather dye. Fiebing's makes a really good black dye, and it works way better than Speedball, in my opinion, my humble opinion. I've tried it, and yeah, you get a really nice dark black, and you know you can do a light clear coat over and protect it just like you would any other colors. So yeah, you've got your dyes that penetrate into the wood. You can chemically change the wood, whether that's using an ebonizing solution that you can make yourself. You can burn the wood, whether it's a friction burn, using a torch or something like that. Or you can paint it. Again, your application depends on A, your preference, what you're trying to do, and B, what the intended use is going to be, whether you're worried about the wear and stuff like that. The only other thing that I don't think I've covered that I've messed with a little bit is bleaching, wood bleaching, and I've tried this a little bit. This is an AB wood bleach. I think it's basically a bleach and an accelerant, which is basically hydrogen peroxide. And I was really trying to do like a maple. I really wanted to get, I can't get holly. I'd love to get some holly, and I've been unable to get it because it's supposedly a very nice, even very white wood. So I've been trying to get that look, and I've been unsuccessful. And the bleaching process did not work so well on the maple. There's very little color change. It's possible that it would work better on maybe the darker woods, but that's going to lighten them to a lighter brown, browns and yellows, and I'm not going to get a white. So something I'm still playing around with. I've heard that you can do that with regular household bleach. I've not tried it. My understanding is that whinge does really well with bleaching. It leaves black streaks because there's different grains in this whinge, and some of it will bleach almost white and some of it will stay very black. So I actually have a project coming up that I'm going to try that with that I think is going to be really neat if I can get it to bleach out first. So we'll keep an eye out for a video there. But anyways, I hope you found that informative. And if you did, please give me a thumbs up and let me know. Give me some comments if you think I've left something out or something else that you've tried or ideas, some things you want to see. This is by no means comprehensive. These are just my experiences. If you're going to play around with any of this, always check into what you're using and the toxicity and stuff. So you want to use the proper equipment. I haven't really handled anything that's terribly bad for you. So good gloves, possibly a respirator, especially if you're spraying. You want to get in your eyes. So eye protection is a good idea. So always research that before you start. So anyways. Give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. I've got a lot of other how-to videos and some more maker videos coming up in the future. So you want to get that bell to ring whenever I put something new on. And we'll hope to catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.